Al Takrar Yulu Am Himar, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is Arabic for repetition can even teach a donkey.
Wow, a donkey. What could you teach a donkey?
Well, maybe to say
Lots
that phrase.
of things with the miracle of repetition.
That is an idiomatic expression analogous to practice makes perfect. Red Bull sure practiced winning all the races last year. Time to see it if they can do it this year. I am Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
I'm doing great. I'm up in Kitsap County, Washington. If you're watching the video version of this on YouTube, which if it hits YouTube on this terrible hotel internet, I'll be really happy about that. But if you are, you can see this massive growler that I'll be drinking throughout the duration of this episode.
Oh, wow.
Which I got from a local...
Is that Uftabak?
It says Ufda, which apparently is something that Vikings say while they're getting sloshed. So I'll be doing my best impression of a Viking for... much of this. Do we have any Vikings? We got Magnussen, we got Hulkenberg.
It's true.
Haas was once the Russians, and now it has been taken over by the Scandinavians.
Yes, speaking of, I don't know, European descent, Rob Zachney is here.
Yeah. There's a good half of European descent. Absolutely.
If you are new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we've got an episode just for you. Our preseason primer episode assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. This year's primer episode is episode 216, if you'd like to go back and listen to that. Also, this show is supported entirely by our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for those patrons. They cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. What's going on in Patreon land this month, Danny?
I believe the next Patreon exclusive podcast we're going to do is going to be Drive to Survive Season 5. We should probably do that next week, because while I am in Washington at the moment on a work trip, I am on a family road trip for the next episodes, the later episodes of this month. So you get to hear me talking from many different hotel rooms around America. But massive thanks to all of our amazing patrons, especially the folks who signed up in the past couple of days as well. Welcome. I also wanted to mention that we are going to we've just turned on annual subscriptions over on Patreon, which has sort of become the standard there now, which is now that when you sign up, you get billed on the day you were signed up, which is much more equitable and makes a lot more sense, and basically means that we can talk about the Patreon later in the month as well and not have to worry about people getting double billed, because you used to just get billed on the day you signed up and on the first of the month, whereas now you just get on whatever day you signed up. So there's been no better time to become a patron of Shift+F1. I guess now there is literally no better time at all, because every time is a good time, or a bad time, depending on how you're thinking about it. Massive thanks to all of our title sponsors, including our new ones, My Wife Sharon, which is not my wife Sharon, it's somebody who has decided to emblazon their wife's name on our beautiful car. Mama Whale Pins, Kikaha of the Art, at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, IronStation.dev, TelemetryDeck.com, David Mule, Drew Stewart, Beatty Foot, Abdullah Al-Thani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, Enzo and Ayrton, Octothorpe Bunny Crimes, Snigs, Alex Goucher, MVKB.com, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, Umberto Roca, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Madden Man, and of course Jason Kelly. Thank you all so much. Might have to put a limit on the number of title sponsors. This thing is getting quite long. I might do that this week. Thank you all, though. You are the best.
Gene Haas would never.
All right, well, thank you, Danny. And let's see if we remember how to do a race recap here. This is usually what we do. We recap the race that just happened, then we go into the news and all the rest of it. So to kick things off, let's talk about the grid. Covered by 1.2 seconds at the end of Q1, which,
yes,
I don't know, boded well. And then things shook out a little like we had all expected. Rob, what were your impressions overall from the first qualifying of the season?
Yeah, I also made a note of that. Like 1.128, I think was the number at least quoted. Like during the broadcast, maybe it was a bit more, but it seemed like a tight grid for sure. It definitely gave me a mistaken impression of how the race would unfold. You also had some odd things coming up during qualifying. One thing I was really curious about was, we just didn't know what Lance Stroll's health situation was. And I will say this, during practice, it didn't look good. I think the first day of practice, he was apparently struggling to get out of the car.
Which is
He
scary.
could barely turn as well. His hand in the in-car view, he was like turning that first turn, the right-hander. Yeah, he was using exactly his hand in a weird sort of way.
It looked like he was palming the steering wheel, which I've done when my hand is hurt, but I'm like, this is to get around a parking lot. This is not me hitting an apex at 150 miles an hour. So but the thing that really surprised me was with a bum wrist, I just didn't think he'd be able to pass the FIA's rather stringent emergency
extraction
car
test.
escape.
Yeah,
Exactly.
We should
They
reset
don't give
though.
you long to do that.
Yeah, we should reset. He was in a cycling accident 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks prior to the race. And we actually didn't know the extent of it until he most recently posted on Instagram. He fractured both wrists.
Oh, wow.
His left hand and the big toe on his right foot, which you used that right foot.
That's just needless.
Yeah, right.
What did he do? Did he say how it happened? Did he fall
It was
off
a
a
cycling
cliff?
training accident. That's all we know.
Yeah.
He hit a pothole.
Yeah, must have been going
That's a
fast.
bad hit. Well, to the point where last week when we talked, we were assuming he wasn't there. They were, we were already. Who was taking his place again?
Felipe Drugovich.
Drugovich was going to take his spot. Yeah, I mean, and apparently the story was that I heard subsequently was that Vettel actually called them to say if they needed him to let him know that he'd be available. But yeah,
he saw those test results.
Yeah,
That
was in one of the pit crew shows or whatever after the fact. So it was really wild to see him out there. Apparently, according to, I think there was an interview with Lawrence where they said they'd put him in a full race test in the sim, so to test if his wrist would be able to deal with 90 minutes or so of it, and he had passed that at least. So who knows? Maybe he was just protecting it a bit, so he was able to deal with the race. Didn't prove to be that much of a factor. It seemed like in the end.
No, we'll talk about the formation lap, but Drew, I was also kind of curious.
Right,
not to sound any alarm bells about your boy, but Hulkenberg showed up and brought the goods.
Yeah,
he sure did.
It was the tale of two different cars, and maybe it's just it goes that way sometimes in F1. But it was kind of striking the different fortunes the two Haas boys had during quali.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's just read down the grid here, and we can get to those two boys. Max Verstappen on top. What do you know? Behind him, his teammate Sergio Perez. Then we've got the two Ferraris. Charles Leclerc, he only did one lap in Q3 to save a fresh set of soft tires for the race, because you only get a certain allotment to last you the whole weekend. Carlos Sainz, his teammate, in fourth. Then in fifth place, not the Mercedes, the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso in fifth. Then we've got the two Mercedes finally, George Russell in sixth, Lewis Hamilton in seventh, and then Lance Stroll in eighth with those bum wrists. In ninth place is Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, and then Nico Hulkenberg, not bad for 2 years out of Formula One. In 11th place, Lando Norris, followed by Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, a double whammy of Alfa Romeos, Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri in 14th, and Alex Albon in 15th. He had to abort a lap in Q2 due to losing part of his front wing, but says he probably could have fought for Q3. Logan Sargent, his teammate, in 16th place, and then Kevin Magnussen in the other Haas down in 17th. Oscar Piastri in the McLaren in 18th, then Nick De Vries in the AlphaTauri in 19th, and then Pierre Gasly down in 20th place for Alpine. And he just sort of said, I don't really have an explanation for that. I didn't really see an explanation for Kevin Magnussen either.
No, and it's going to be one of those things, I think, where after a couple of races we'll start to see where the gremlins are, whether or not it's a bad setup, whether or not it's hangovers from practice. The qualifying also doesn't really tell the story of Alonso's couple of days, because Alonso was top of the timing charts I think he was second in practice 1, and he was top in practice 2 and 3. And for Q3, I think he was the fast. Sorry, Q1, I think he was the fastest. So it really felt like the Red Bulls turned it on at the end. You know what I mean? Like it felt like they were sandbagging until the final lap, and then they put it to them. So in a way, it was kind of a surprise to see Alonso behind the Ferraris. Actually, maybe not so much of a surprise to see him behind Verstappen, just knowing how solid Verstappen is both quali and the races. But yeah, so I in a way it was somewhat disappointing, but it was, you can see how good the car is when you see Lance Stroll also, sitting comfortably in the top 10.
Yeah, well, qualifying is one thing. The race is entirely another. Danny, do you want to take us through the start of the first race of the 2023 Formula One season?
Yeah, right before it started, I always get like a rush of blood to the head, and I want to like just tweet something outlandish, like something's gonna happen. I just got, when you feel something in your bones, and you're just like, ooh, you know what's gonna happen? There's a bunch of rookies here, and they're all just gonna mess it up, and there's gonna be a big crash on this, like, because it's a sharp, it's a high deceleration, sharp right-hander. And as it was, they were all great, even Steven, through those early turns. The main action at the front was that Perez had a dodgy start, which basically gave up the second position to Leclerc. And his fight was almost immediately with Carlos Sainz. Arguably, he had a bad enough start where Sainz might have gotten past him, but Perez sort of, I think, in a way, conceded second so he could keep third, and made sure that he had a better exit outside of turn 1 for Sainz. And then further down, back at the sort of the end of that first straight, as we get into, I believe it's known as turn 4, it is turn 4, we had an interesting piece of contact between the Aston Martins. And this move that Alonso does will come back again and again and again. It is like, all of the action that happens with Alonso in this race, almost all of it happens at some stage, either happens at turn 4 or begins at turn 4. And a large part of it has to do with this very wide entry that he takes. He doesn't cut the corner and sort of like drive out of the apex, which some people do, because there is a bit of a hill on the outside of it. He settles down the car on the outside and then turns and sweeps up the hill, so that he can try and get a good push out, and get maybe an overtaking move down into the sort of downhill little turn that happens around turn 8 and turn 7. What happened in this case was he got tagged by his teammate and basically wobbled the car so much that he gave up the position to Russell. But if anything, it was just like, well, thank God the Astons didn't take each other out on the first lap, and also it seemed like nothing happened to either car. Despite the fact that it was bodywork on bodywork, I think. I don't think he hit a wheel.
It looked to me like front wing to wheel. So
oh, did it?
Yeah, it did look like there was wheel contact from it. Like, I think they got very lucky there, and it did make me wonder. During the formation lap, Stroll went off, and it did again. Like, I kept wondering, are we going to see him? This looked more like. I don't feel. I am not sure if the track has been like this every year. It feels like this year the dirty side versus clean side of the track thing was really pronounced. I think that was like, certainly there on the start, but it did sort of seem like once you got offline in turn 4, like if you're coming down the inside a little bit, it could be pretty dicey trying to slow the car to make the corner. And that seemed to be part of what caught Stroll out. And I guess, unbeknownst to us, there's starting the race and then there's lining up for the race.
Oh, yeah, you're right. We didn't learn about this until quite a number of laps later.
Yes.
Yeah, but it was, but like, just keep in mind that like it came to light a bit later that Ocon had overshot, I guess, his like starting his grid box.
He was offset laterally. So he was too too far to the right, I think, of what his pit box should have been. But he earned.
It was the butterfly effect. It was the domino meme.
Oh my god! Yeah,
just being slightly off in the pit box to having one of the most nightmarish races I've seen in F1. Like it truly cursed race. But I mean, like, yeah.
I don't think he shows up in my notes. Besides that, so we may as well just go over it right now. He got a 5-second penalty for that, and then when he pitted, the team, when you have a penalty and you come in for a pit, you're supposed to wait for the duration of the penalty time before touching the car. So effectively, you serve that penalty in the pits. So I actually really like watching it because it's like everybody hovers for 5 seconds and then they pounce on the car. The FIA ruled that a mechanic touched the car 0.4 seconds too early. So there's another 5-second penalty, which is now 10 seconds because the first 5-second one wasn't properly served. So again, he has to serve another penalty. And on coming into the pits, the subsequent time, speeding in the pit lane by 0.1 kilometers per hour.
Wow.
So there's another 5 seconds.
Yeah, just, the margins are thin, but you want to stay on the right side of them.
Not the, obviously, no, I mean, look, two of these things are driver error. Really, it's like two of these things are squarely on his shoulders. Like, one is Alpine botching the stop a little bit, but two of these things are just like the sort of issue that, we see people line up incorrectly from time to time, but definitely not a good start for him this season, and probably, I don't want to keep belaboring the point of the history between him and Gasly and kind of just we've been curious to see how this is going to work out, but he certainly he certainly put a lot of blood in the water with this race. So yeah, he was, in a race that was already kind of a tale of the divergent fortunes of Alpine and Aston Martin. Ocon sort of wrote an entire chapter, on his own in that story. My next notes after the start at least was, Verstappen just runs away with it.
Yeah.
How many laps? How many laps did we get before you started to realize this race was over? I feel like by lap 3,
5.
when they were he's lapping second clear.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I was just like, this is done.
Yeah. And I was a little bit worried actually, because the first couple of laps it really looked like a procession. It was like, oh boy, we're not getting much overtaking done here at all. And it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe I guess it helps when DRS kicks in, but it wasn't really until 10 laps had passed that we started to see people try it.
Yeah, so lap 13, Alonso catches back up to Russell, makes a move around the outside of turn 1. Russell defends, so Alonso then drag races him down the next straight and edges ahead, but Russell fights back for the next few corners. In the end, though, Alonso ends up on top, taking 5th place.
So he does the swoop thing again. When he tries to do the overtake on turn 4, he does the swoop around, and because he ends up basically driving too fast into the back of the other car, he just kind of catches himself, and that allowed Russell to get back in front of him again.
Yeah. It was a fun little duel. It also came on the heels of Russell just sort of politely inquiring to the team whether he thought he had a little more pace. Is Lewis just managing his own pace, or something up? Yeah. And they were like, Lewis is struggling, but Russell did not press the point to be let by, and probably a good decision. This seems like it's going to be a year where Mercedes is going to need people in tail gunner position a lot to shore up finishing order.
Somebody else who had a good start was Bottas, going from 12th to 8th on the opening lap. He then pitted early, and on lap 17 is in 6th ahead of Alonso, who had pitted a few laps prior.
And Russell. He overtook both of them on 16.
Yeah, so Alonso makes pretty quick work of him with DRS, but still Bottas, I think, looking pretty good. Russell also makes it past on the next lap, but of course Bottas does not make it easy for him. Lap 16, we get to the first retirement of the race. Oscar Piastri of McLaren from 12th with an electrical issue. The team had tried to replace the steering wheel, which has a lot of electronics in it, in the pit box, but it didn't work because apparently the issue was further down in the steering column, the electrical problem. Norris also had a tough race due to pneumatic leak, which is why we saw the team plugging in that air hose into his car at every pit stop. He apparently had to pit every 10 laps. He did 6 stops.
So bad.
But the team just left him out there to gain data.
Do you know what it was like? It reminded me of if you were in a streetcar race and you had a slow puncture and you just needed to like it was like your man comes over with the little hose thing and sticks it in the side of the car, and they're kind of looking at each other like, is that enough now? I think so. And then so it pulls it out. It's like there was a very early, I was thinking, lads, there's 23 races this year, retire the car. Like, what are you doing? What's the point of this? I guess maybe data or...
Yeah.
I guess, but, data's expensive to get this way now with the engine limits they've got.
Yeah.
But, like, McLaren looked lost at sea. Like, that's just the fundamental issue here is they seem to have a real dog.
They had, I think, the fewest laps run in testing. So maybe they're just trying to make up the difference here in the race.
Maybe.
To your point, Rob, by lap 26, Verstappen is 13 seconds ahead. So the actual battle is for second, with Leclerc in second, having secured that place on the opening lap. Perez having pitted for the soft tire, while Leclerc took hards, has made up time to him, and on lap 26, dives to the inside of turn 1 and makes the pass look easy.
Yeah, sure does. And everyone who's not a Red Bull fan, and I do not begrudge Red Bull fans, of course, but everyone who wanted there to be some sort of, maybe the Red Bull won't be as good this year, unfortunately was a bit let down. I think with that overtake, it was kind of like, oh boy, maybe they're even further ahead this year.
Yeah. Russell, running in 6th place, comes in for hard tires on lap 32. Apparently the medium tires are trash here. I didn't see anyone on them. And then exits the pits right in front of Stroll, who gets a run on him out of turn 1 with his warmer tires and makes a nice pass on the outside of Russell with DRS for 7th place. And when I saw that, it just sort of hit me. It's going to be strange to talk a lot about Lance Stroll this year.
Yeah, it is. And it was interesting seeing an Aston Martin overtaking a Mercedes, and then it happened again 5 laps later with perhaps the battle that we were most looking forward to talking about this year.
Yes. Lap 37, Alonso has closed up to his old McLaren teammate, Lewis Hamilton. His tires, Alonso's, are 4 laps newer, not to mention the car advantage, which makes for, as you said, Danny, a great battle between 2 former champions. Alonso gets a run with DRS in the second straight and dives to the inside, Hamilton giving him just enough space. But while Alonso does get ahead, as he's turning, he loses grip for just a second, which gets his car out of shape and allows Hamilton to come back and retake the place. I think in most of the other drivers there, that is a collision.
Yeah, it was awesome to see. And it was also Alonso trying the other way around that turn, which he doesn't usually do. This time he went down the inside, like you said, and probably didn't have as much of a read on what the traction was like on the outside of that apex. I can only guess, but that's kind of what it looked like. And then we ended up getting probably the overtake of the race, actually. Move of the race on the next lap, I think it was.
I think this is going to be in the wrap-up videos of top 10 moves of the season. As to your point, Danny, Alonso trying all kinds of cutback moves, taking different lines than Hamilton, but then makes an unexpected dive up the inside of turn 10. And I got to believe with the angle that turn is, it's sharp. So, if you ever played like a racing video game and you try to take the inside of a sharp turn, you're just going to hit the wall, right? On the exit when you pass the apex. But so he must have just, not only does he narrowly miss Hamilton as he squeezes in there, but he must have used every inch and ounce of traction. I don't know if you measure traction in ounces to maintain control. It's just an amazing move. Yeah,
it's really terrific. Very cool to see, and at least it was interesting to see overtakes happening in different spots, but mostly around that first sector, as is to be expected in a track with 2 DRS straights back to back.
Yeah. Lap 41. Go ahead, Rob.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's at the moment at least, the Red Bull looks really dominant up front, but everything behind them looks really interesting,
which is good.
And
I'll take that.
That's gonna be a lot of meaningful battles for position happening this year.
And all eyes at this stage are like, look, okay, we understand that the Red Bulls are probably going to get a 1-2 here unless something happens in terms of the cars crashing or failing or something. But you're kind of looking at Leclerc then and going, oh, can Alonso catch him? Because like Alonso getting a podium, like I think they said at the start of the race it would have been podium 99, and you're like, oh, that's kind of meaningful. Like I wonder if he'll do it. And then what happened.
Well, Red Bull is still Red Bull, and Ferrari is still Ferrari when it comes to bad luck. As Leclerc pulls over from third place with a mechanical problem.
Just feel for them, don't you? Like I'm not a Tifosi either, but like there's nothing. The silver lining was, I guess you're thinking, oh, then Alonso has a chance of getting a podium, but like it's just if you have to feel for them, you have to feel for Leclerc, and Sainz, and then they cut to the pit wall and it's just somebody else throwing their hands in the air going, I don't know.
Right. But now it is a fight for the podium between the two Spaniards, Alonso in fourth and Sainz now in third. But Alonso just cannot be stopped. And on lap 45, closes up to Sainz at turn 1, has a similar moment to when he tried to pass Hamilton, wiggling right at the apex of the corner. Somehow avoids smashing into Sainz and has another try at turn 10, which Sainz protects well.
Yeah.
But he locks up at the next corner and can't do anything about Alonso's speed on the next straight. And so Alonso sweeps around and into third place with 11 laps to go.
I can count on one hand the amount of times I've seen somebody overtake between turns 10 and 11 on that track. It does not happen very often because it's hard because you really compromise yourself on turn 11 if you don't get a good. You need to have the overtake done halfway down that straight to be able to get up the hill properly. But he does.
One of the arguments right now, like certainly this is what the Red Bull boys are kind of intimating, right? Is once again we got a tracing point situation where they sort of joked about I believe they joked about like how similar the Aston is to like Red Bull's design, like aero concept, and I do kind of wonder if the ability to keep it close through that sector up into 10, so that you're in position to strike using that like. Curtailed DRS, maybe highlights a key difference between what Aston is doing and what Ferrari is.
Yeah, there was a new graphic I saw, I think during qualifying, that was something like sector dominance or track dominance.
Great graphic.
And they showed like not the different sectors, but different like micro sectors, like who or what it was versus I think it was Verstappen versus Hamilton, who had the better performance in each area of the track. And it was for the Red Bull all the corners, and for the Mercedes all the straights. I thought that was fascinating.
That's cool. Yeah, I've never seen it visually shown. We obviously know that because it gets talked a lot about.
They have
that's quite cool.
They have I can't remember what it was. It was sort of a comparison of a bunch of front running drivers, but I can't remember the way they presented the info. But they've got some nice new like infographics that they're putting up during the race, and they all seem better conceived than the AWS like Magic 8-Ball approach to tire wear we saw in previous years.
How good is this driver? 4.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
don't worry about it.
AWS says
you don't worry.
Odds of Epic winning in the next lap are 25%. But like some of the infographics we got in this package do seem really, really cool. So like, obviously I hope we get more of that stuff for sure.
Speaking of the DRS thing, did you notice just one of the other there was so much news this week. Like I was glued to practice. It was all the interesting bits coming out of it. Well, one of the interesting little technical innovations, let's call it, that I saw was that to basically get around the, I guess it's the floor height issue. They have this cable. Did you see this? There's like a cable. So there's a minimum like distance you need to have. But some of the cars are riding a bit higher than that, and so they have this. It's almost a wire that trails around the bottom of the floor, like on the side pods, basically. That's like maybe another quarter-inch lower, and that apparently satisfies the mandate for the lowest part of the car to be to the ground. And there's like 2 or 3 teams that have this, and they reckon everyone's going to have it by the next race because it basically lets them jack the car up slightly, which is
weird,
interesting, yeah.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in our news story about McLaren. But just to round out the race here, some other nice moves around elsewhere in the field. Gasly, who started in last place, going for a 3-stopper in this one. Soft, hard, soft. and it's working for him. In lap 42, he's up into the points and then manages to use DRS to get around the outside of Albon at turn 1 for 9th place. Another really nice move in this race.
Yeah, and Albon's like, 10th? Sure,
I'll take it. Another nice move. Tsunoda, who had just pitted for soft tires, comes out of the pits right behind his teammate Nick De Vries and Guan Yu Zhou, Guan Yu, who are fighting over 11th place. Tsunoda bides his time, and while De Vries is covering off, Zhou swoops past both of them in 2 corners.
Yeah, we talked already about the De Vries-Tsunoda battle. It was interesting to see Tsunoda do so well. De Vries not a happy boy with his engineer after the race, and they had to give him the old, we'll talk about it.
Oh, I didn't hear this.
Yeah. He was instantly on the blower kind of saying, he's hyper competitive, right? And I forget exactly what he said, but it was like, such and such was wrong, or blah, 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 blah. And the engineer's like, we just do this part for the fans. Just like say the team did well, and we'll talk about it later. He didn't say that in so many words, but that was interesting. Also, Nick De Vries I think Nick De Vries is like such a weird guy. Like I like him, but he just seems like a very like interesting dude. They did an interview with like all the drivers on the YouTube channel, and what's one thing you don't know about me? And Nick De Vries' answer was, I'm scared of animals.
Like all of them?
So the lady asks, like, all animal? Like, and he's like, yeah. He's like, I'm not like scared. Like some are like scarier than others, but like I'm scared of animals. I don't know what they're thinking.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I was like, Nick De Vries is like slowly becoming my favorite weird F1 driver.
Great. Keep F1 weird. But Verstappen 12 seconds ahead and wins this race.
Yeah, what a great Red Bull fans must be delighted. I mean, look, the car's super fast, the drivers were impeccable. Even Perez, who we have many times last year talked about how he did something rash on the first lap, which cost him. This time around, arguably he had a bad start, but he had a level head and decided to win the fight 15 laps later, which he did. So I think they're in a stronger spot than ever this year.
Yeah, could not be stronger.
I also just like I do think we got to hand it to Stroll in this case. Yes, like clearly that car's damn good, and they've advanced rapidly up the field, but at the same time, like he did look pretty
racy,
like hamstrung by that wrist issue at various points over the weekend. And to have the race come out this way, not only is it like a solid race, just under normal circumstances, but this is one of those like gutty performances that like deserves probably some special mention, because to be able to deliver that under pretty crummy circumstances is impressive. Yeah.
So just to finish off the result here, Sergio Perez in second. Fernando Alonso gets his 99th podium. Danny drinks to that. Carlos Sainz in fourth, Lewis Hamilton fifth, Lance Stroll with 2 broken wrists, 6th place ahead of George Russell, Valtteri Bottas, Pierre Gasly in 9th, and Alex Albon rounding out the points-paying positions. Behind them, we have Yuki Tsunoda in 11th, Logan Sargent, solid rookie performance in a Williams, USA.
Check out both those Williams, it's not bad.
Yeah. James Vowles, new team principal's got to be happy about that one. Kevin Magnussen comes home in 13th place, 2 spots ahead of his teammate Nico Hülkenberg. Nick De Vries is in the middle of those two in 14th place. Nico Hülkenberg received a 15-second time penalty for multiple track limit violations.
He got the
was
flag.
Was it 15? My note says 5.
This is from F1's website, so maybe there were more.
I
Maybe there were
Rob.
5 infractions.
He got the flag. He got that flag used to only be for like Grosjean, Maldonado and stuff. But he got the flag saying don't do it again, and he did it again. Rough day out for Nico Hülkenberg. Great quality, bad race.
Yeah.
We should mention that he did damage his front wing on the first lap.
Oh, right.
Yes,
Which was probably the contributing factor.
Yeah. 16th place, Zhou Guan Yu. 17th, Lando Norris with that pneumatic failure. And then not classified were Esteban Ocon. They just retired his car. It's just, like, just too many penalties. Let's just pull this one. Charles Leclerc with that engine problem, and Oscar Piastri with the electrical issue.
How about that for Alpine? Complete reversal of fortune for their two drivers. One in the points and one of them who had such a good quali again. I feel like it's the same as ever after one race. Some questions have been answered, and I have 20 million more questions as a result of this race.
Tell you one thing I know for certain is I'm in for just a nightmare of a season. So my parents are diehard Alonso fans.
Oh, wow.
They have drunk every ounce of the Kool-Aid possible about him. Like, when he'd be coming out of his McLaren and be like, I just drove the greatest race of my career. Nobody knows the feats I'm doing. My parents, like, just lapped that up. They were just like, it's such a shame that Fernando, he's the best driver on the grid. He's like one of the greatest F1 drivers of all time. It's such a shame that he's turning in the greatest F1 drives in the history of the sport. He's just not getting wins for them. And so, like, that morning, I get a message like, so excited for the race. Go, Fernando. What a wonderful thing it would be for the sport if he won. And I'm, like, just fully delusional. Just like my parents being like, man, like, F1. Just imagine
F1 needs this.
It needs that. And so does the human spirit. The human spirit needs Fernando Alonso to win another championship. So that we can all realize that dreams can come true.
It is so perfectly set up for him to be like, what do you call it? It's not quite anti-hero. It's like annoying, but brilliant, like master troll, or I don't know what it is. But he even said it in one of the episodes of Drive to Survive. He's like, every story like needs a bad guy. I'll be the bad guy. Yeah,
amazing.
So, yeah. I think I am very excited. I think the Alonso. Everyone loves a good like comeback, right? When Schumi came back, right? Everyone really wanted him to be fighting at the top, and like it's same with we'd all love it for Hulkenberg as well, but there's something about Alonso who has been doing this lemon dance between all the different cars for so long that it's just perfectly set up. Like, I think it's going to be so fascinating this year. It has
to be. We have not gotten a good read on like what his actual, like, what is he capable of doing in a competitive F1 car.
I've never seen it. I wasn't watching F1 when he won his championships or was in good cars. I've only seen him, like, I've only heard tell of his abilities, and him wiping the floor with his teammates. Well, that's not always been true.
Yeah, and what's I think very interesting as well is, like, can you imagine anyone who's going to give less of a shit fighting Verstappen? He will hold. The man holds 100%. No quarter. He will make Max look like a baby sheep in comparison to like Alonso is brutal. Like, he will not. There's no Verstappen and Hamilton arguably have like been quite mature about those big battles we had over those races. I don't think Alonso has that in him, especially at this part of his career. I don't think he's got time for any of that.
Yeah, but like, he's got to get. He is not in can lay a glove on him range yet. Like, right now, like with that Red Bull, like Max has the equivalent of the like 9-foot wingspan, right? Where it's just like, if Alonso can get into a duel with him, we'll see some fireworks.
Yeah,
big gap between first and third in this race.
Well, we just ran down effectively the driver standings because there's only been one race, but let's do constructors. Red Bull Racing is on top with 43 points. Aston Martin is in second place with 23. Wow. Who's in third? Mercedes with 16. Ferrari has 12 with that one retirement of Charles Leclerc. Fifth place, Alfa Romeo with 4 points. Alpine has 2. Williams has 1 in seventh place. Then a three-way tie with 0 points for AlphaTauri, Gene Haas and team, and McLaren. And let's now take it then to the nears. Danny, what's going on with Imola?
Yeah, so apparently Autosport got a bit of a scoop. We talked before about the sort of the tests they're going to do at qualifying, the experiments they're going to do this year.
Always messing with qualifying, Danny.
They are, and this one's a funny one because it basically just means restricting the amount of tires, and I believe it's coming from the mandate about what is it? Just like being good to the environment. What do we call that thing again?
Greenwashing.
Making this whole sport seem not ridiculous and
Eco
wasting
goodness.
power and energy and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Sustainability. How about that?
That's the word I was looking for. Sustainability. How to sustain the tires going around the tracks, how to make it so we're not using too many tires, XYZ. So the only news is that Autosport have apparently gotten wind that Imola is going to be one of the races that they're doing for this. In case you forgot what that rule was, or that experiment was, it basically means that instead of 13 tires in the weekend, they're going to reduce it down to 11, and they're also going to mandate what tires are used during what sections of qualifying. So right now, as you may have noticed, if this is your first race, drivers often tend to use the softs to try and get in their best tires, but they are free to use mediums and hards if they want to during that phase. In this new experiment during these races, drivers will be forced to use the hard tires in Q1, mediums in Q2, and softs in Q3, unless there's rain conditions, of course, and then it all gets thrown out the window. And then also the types of tires they have, which they are allowed to pick, is also mandated, or the number of them rather. So under this experiment, drivers will have access to 3 sets of hards, 4 mediums, and 4 softs for the weekend. The plan is to have 6 sets of tires available for qualifying and 5 to juggle between practice and the race. So apparently Imola is one of them. I'm not really sure, how much this is going to affect quali. Nobody really does, but I guess we'll see when we go to the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix.
The one thing I kind of like about this philosophically is that, like, if you build a car that can perform on all 3 sets of tires well, then you should be rewarded for that.
Yeah, I can see a scenario where lower teams that are taking a risk to get higher in quali maybe don't, because we have other artificial things, like there was the rule, which is this rule got thrown out, right? The one where if you don't set a time in Q3, you get to start on whatever tires you want.
That
right?
is now gone, yes.
That is now gone, yeah. So they have had rules in here to basically, try and create that competition. Obviously, this is coming from the sustainability side, so it's not necessarily, something that they're introducing to make better racing. But we'll just have to wait and see whether it makes any difference at all. Actually,
and I say that kind of hand waving away the fact that, like, that just means that, like, Haas and AlphaTauri and Williams and stuff are all just going to be on hard tires all the time, and that might be tough, right? So it's not. Yeah. It is. I'm not saying that necessarily to be like, and it's balanced. I don't think it is. I think that's why they're trying it, right? But I am curious to see how it plays out. Speaking of how it's going to play out, Rob, some doom and gloom here from Mercedes.
Oh boy.
This was such a shocking letdown that I'm like, words kind of fail. So by the end of qualifying, Mercedes apparently had internal conversations saying that this season is a write-off, that their car concept is just not going to work. Let's revisit again, because this is the part that I cannot believe. So, from Autosport, within minutes of the end of qualifying, and even before George Russell and Lewis Hamilton sat down with the engineers, team boss Toto Wolff declared that title hopes were all but over, and a new car concept was needed. I don't think this package is going to be competitive eventually. We gave it our best shot all over the winter, and now we all just need to regroup, sit down with the engineers, who are totally not dogmatic about anything. Why did you stick with this concept? Like this, so we went through a year of them talking about how the W13 Mercedes, the Side Pod Zero concept, was fundamentally flawed and like set them off on a bad development trajectory for all of the 22 season. Why was it back? It was like the Arrested Development meme but it could work for us.
Right.
Like the only thing that I can really think of driving this decision is that the cost cap has made it really tough to throw away R&D you did in an existing concept. Like that they did make a lot of gains last year, and they figured out a lot of what was going on with that design. The only thing I can think of is that they they really did not want to have to scrap all that progress they made and start over, because effectively you're just eating into development budget for both Car of the Future, and it means that what you did for much of last year will end up being kind of a waste. But so like after the race, obviously things did not go much better. If Ferrari doesn't have its issue, and maybe if Stroll's healthier, it's possible they finish even further down the order, but they weren't really, on a level with the Astons. They weren't anywhere near the Ferraris. And obviously, a fight with Red Bull is completely off the table. Wolff said after the race, that was one of our worst days in racing. It was not good at all. We are lacking pace front, right, and center. The Aston Martins are very fast, and the Red Bull is just on a different planet. It hurts that they are so far ahead. It reminds me of our best years when we put 1 second on everyone else. So here is they're talking about this car can't compete for a championship. The season is going to be another lost season of what might also be like a waning peak for Hamilton. Who knows? I mean, Alonso, maybe it's all just it's the car, right? Who knows? But another lost season seems really painful for that team. And I am so floored that it went this way. Yeah. There's this little part of me, it's like, did they really come into the season with no fallback option if the car concept came up as short as it did last year? The Autosport has a good article about why they are so quick to give up on it this year, which is basically that they did solve the issues they had. They have whipped that zero side pod concept into as good a form as it can, and so the fact that it's still that far back means there's not a lot left to unlock with it. Whereas last year they were clearly just they were lost with the design, but that also meant there was a lot of room for discovery. Now they've discovered a lot, and the deficit is still there, and there's no more juice to be squeezed. But I kind of can't believe they came into the season with everything staked on a car that they spent, or a concept that they spent a year deriding.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's frankly kind of bizarre to hear them not only speak so quickly about how bad it is, but just being so transparent and open about it. Yeah, it feels to me like maybe getting it out there is therapeutic in a way. I'm not trying to, beat around the bush here. It's bad.
It's like it also reads slightly like a bit arrogant to me in a way as well, that it's like, in a way, I guess it's the fighting mentality, right? They want to be winning championships, so that's what they're doing. But the idea that if they can't win the championship, they're just gonna throw it out is a little bit like, I don't know, is it a way of protecting themselves against the fact that if Aston Martin trumped them this year, that they can say, well, we weren't really trying. We took our ball and went home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a bit of, it's hard to tell, of course.
You just sort of say, we're not really contesting this championship anymore. So it doesn't matter if Red Bull beats us like a drum, because we aren't even competing. And no, I'm with you. It's kind of it's kind of a shabby thing to also just be saying we're going to be fielding two cars for 20 some races this year, and they'll take what points they can get, but they're not in it to win it. This is the first time I've really kind of wondered. This is probably the first decision from Wolff, honestly, that I've really sort of done a double take, that they would have stuck with something that burned them so badly last year. Really makes me wonder what went into that decision. And it seems like there's no other concept they can bring out this year. So I guess on the 24 for them.
It just shows, if you've only been, I know, Drew, for instance, you talk about you didn't remember a time before Mercedes dominance for the first few years of this podcast, right? And this is the thing, once you've been watching F1 long enough, this is the thing you become very aware of, which is that the biggest team in the world can completely fall from grace. It's very easy to happen, and a Phoenix can rise and win. A Jensen Button can win a championship a year that no one expected him to be fighting for third position. It's so crazy how nothing happens It's like war, is what they said. It's periods of extreme boredom punctuated by periods of... You have periods of no change and then periods of vast change that just happen out of nowhere. Aston's obviously the story this year, but what a fall from grace for Mercedes this past 3 years have been, and it looks like it's a higher climb for them than ever before. You know, that mountain's just getting taller.
Well, another team that's hoping to reverse direction is McLaren. There's a little bit, I think, a light at the end of the tunnel here in this Autosport article. They detail the conundrum that the porpoising regulations put them in. So last year was the first year of these new aerodynamic regulations. A lot of teams struggled with the porpoising effect, which was a result of the higher focus on downforce. So when you get a car lower to the ground, part of it can stall at a different time than other parts of it, which causes it to wobble. I think I've got that right. And so the FIA was like, this is hurting our drivers. Thus, only your car must be or your cars must be elevated by 15 millimeters. So this would cause the cars to be slower, but not buffet as much as they were going along in the air. So that was agreed to last summer. But you know, the development for the 2023 cars are kind of at that point ongoing. And so in September, says this article, the team decided to take a different route with where they were currently going, but it wasn't enough to completely revamp their entire car. So effectively, they are starting this season with a compromised car, and then a greater upgrade is going to come at the Baku Grand Prix that will address those issues that were kind of, again, set in motion by this porpoising regulation. I hope that all made sense. And I don't know, I'm now looking forward to Baku even more than I usually was.
Yeah, there was some more bouncing in signs, I remember. I think during practice they had for the first time. And it was funny. I think it was during practice because I remember one of the commentators saying, I'm not sure I would have said that over the radio because the FIA are watching the porpoising, but they're not, or F1 are, but they're not necessarily like watching everyone all the time for it. Obviously there wasn't an issue during the race necessarily, but it seemed to be affecting Sainz's Ferrari at least during the sessions prior to the race.
I hope McLaren can bring something out that at least gets them back in the conversation and the hunt. The fact that, like, after qualifying, Zach Brown was just saying that their tires weren't coming in until halfway through their flying laps, like, that's not going to do it, fellas. So I'm hoping that they can address some of these issues. So this is not F1 per se, the last thing I want to touch on that happened this racing weekend. But, you know, we remember Romain Grosjean. We love Romain Grosjean.
The Phoenix?
Spoilers for the St. Petersburg IndyCar race. Just want to flag that here.
So it was a great race and also quintessentially IndyCar. So, Drew, are you aware that Romain is a pilot now?
I am, yes. They showed a clip of him flying landing a twin-engine airplane, which is, better than me. I only got my single-engine land into that airport where the race happens.
It's pretty spectacular, honestly.
Yeah. And smooth landing. The guy greased it. It was awesome.
So he is now piloting. He's taking that Nicky Lauda at the end of Rush. Maybe he watched Rush and was like, piloting. Yes, I should.
Hey, you know what F1 drivers do after they're in horrific burn crashes? Right? He's like, who do I look up to?
It'll be like it'll be better than therapy.
Exactly.
Learning to pilot. So the thing about St. Petersburg is it's got its main straight is this, like, it's a huge airport runway, and then it's pretty tight, twisting roads and taxiways outside of that straight. And so it was a classic IndyCar type race of when they could get a good race going, it was awesome, but they got full course cautions just constantly, especially because I guess their tire compound this year is flaking off in great big pebbles.
Oh no!
And
really?
so, like, the commentators were saying, like, sometimes marbles is a metaphor that we're using to describe what's happening off the racing line. Not this year. If you go off the racing line, it is like you are driving on a bed of rather large impacted rubber spheres.
Wow.
And so like guys would go to make passes and would just go sailing straight into the tire barriers. So it was some wild accidents. Like 2 times, I think cars got like sent airborne by strikes from behind. Just like crazy stuff happening right and left. But Roman put it on the pole at the during quali and was driving an incredible race. Like I would say Verstappen at the start of this race. It was like this thing looks done. And the only person he needed to dump behind him was Colton Herta, which is an Andretti teammate. And then so Herta didn't let off. He never does. And he kept pushing it. And here's the thing, like I feel like Andretti had a horrible weekend. I think out of 4 cars, they ended up 3 being write-offs by the end of the race.
It was not the only Andretti on Andretti crash in that race either, right?
No, but the common offer here is that Colton Herta's strategist is his dad. And
by the way, people should look up. Was an IndyCar racer in the '90s himself, and I don't know about you guys. There's something about race car drivers with glasses that I feel like is so much more hardcore. It's like a big guy named Tiny or something. Anyway, sorry.
He wears glasses while he's driving, is it?
Yes.
So like the guy in who's the gentleman in Fassbender's Le Mans series? Yeah, he does.
See, exactly.
Yeah, all right.
Richie.
But
you know what I'm saying.
I'll just say this is there have been weird like miscommunications between Colton and his pit wall, i.e. his dad, last year that cost them some stuff. This year, there's this really weird message where he's like, so do we care much about the pace on these tires? Do we need to save them at all? Or, what are we doing here? And his dad's like, well, yeah, if we don't save them, well, it was really weird, conversational, like, I don't know, just kind of like vibes-based race strategy. And what do you know? Colton's tires went off, and he just like plummeted through the field ended up in the mid-pack where, like, on restarts, he got caught up in some trash and got taken out, I think, by Will Power, though he had a hand in that. So that's one Andretti car that just ends up, like, kind of own-goaling on tire strategy. But they do the same thing with Grosjean. He had a pretty stable, like, 7-second lead for a good portion of this race. Remember, this is functionally a spec series. So pulling out a 7-second lead means that, on setup and pace, you've killed it. And they just decided to keep him out. And they were like, I think it was like Scott McLaughlin was taking a half second out of him a lap. And they just would not bring him in. They were like hell-bent on getting him, his window was at 30. They kind of kept him out there till lap like 33 for no good reason. He cut his lead in half and never fully regained it. But he was in a position to get the lead late in the race, and he just needed, it worked out well. He is coming around, his tire's up to temperature. McLaughlin's coming out of the pits. He goes to pass McLaughlin, and McLaughlin on cold tires, he does not want to yield and tries to force Grosjean out wide in a portion of the track that narrows really fast, heading into a tire barrier. And Grosjean, having been balked at this once and having a huge head of steam, like there was no defending this move, he sent it. They touched, and they both took each other out. And so, like, the Phoenix had this thing twice, really. He had this thing, like, in his hand. And first race strategy and then an overzealous defense from McLaughlin kind of cost him the race. Now, here's the thing. There's great footage of Grosjean melting down after this, like screaming into the tire barrier is a very iconic shot. But in the interview, he's doing the I don't know what that was. It's not racing, like very high dudgeon, righteous indignation stuff. And I'm like, man, Roman, like we know who you are. Like if the shoot, we know you've done that move on the other side. We know you've been McLaughlin, a bunch of times in your career. And the difference between him and McLaughlin is McLaughlin did seem gutted. He was like horribly apologetic. He's like, that's not how I race. I shouldn't have done it. I feel terrible that I did that to Romain. And they did, they hugged it after the race. But it was awesome, and it was an awesome race, despite, I would say, there's probably 45 minutes of like race time that is watching yellow flags.
Yeah.
But it was, y'all watched it? It was...
I did, yeah. And I'll just point out that I think IndyCar still does this. They do a 40-minute highlight of the race on their YouTube channel of every race. So
which will capture about all the racing in this one, probably.
Yeah.
Right,
so if you want to go back and watch, that's a good way to do it. I'll see what I can find and to link in the show notes.
But yeah, it was a really exciting race. Like Indy is huge field, really competitive.
I'm gonna watch that.
It's gonna kill me that we got to wait like a month for them to race again.
Right, yeah. I watched some clips here and there, but I didn't watch the full 40. I forgot they did that big helpful of highlights, so I'm gonna check that out.
Also, fun fact: Colton Herta's dad, Brian Herta, was the car that Zanardi passed at Laguna Seca in The Pass in 1996. Legendary.
There you go.
I will link that in the show notes as well.
That's like you're the guy who gets dunked on in the poster, right? Where it's just like you were also there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also getting dunked on me in our fantasy league. My team, Mike Crack is your crack, is currently 1,941st with 179
points. Who were your picks? Who were you trotting out there?
Let's see. Can I see where's my team here? Okay.
I gotta log in and find mine as well.
I've got Verstappen. He's my turbo driver. What do you know? Leclerc, Russell, Alonso, Ocon, and then the teams Aston Martin and Alfa Romeo.
Okay. Your
not bad
Ocon
picks.
Didn't work out. That's not bad though. Can I tell you mine?
Sure.
Okay, my team deck chair Winks has Alonso, who I didn't think I'd picked as my turbo driver. I thought I'd picked Max, but apparently I did pick Alonso. Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, Pierre Gasly, and Nico Hulkenberg, which seemed like it had really worked out during qualifying.
Oh,
yeah. and then went very, very bad. And my two teams are Red Bull and Aston Martin. So might be something there. Yeah.
Nice. Well, our overall rankings in our fantasy league, which, by the way, you can join using the link in the show notes, are the same for the season and the one race because we've only had one. We have a 4-way tie for second place. Podium's getting pretty crowded. So in second place with a score of 373, we have El Pialonzo, Gnomit. What are you guys making me say? Haas Avocados. Why have we not seen that before?
Yeah, that seems obvious.
Music City Machine Guns. And in first place, Ahsoka Toto.
Ahsoka Toto. Okay.
It's what you got to do to really loosen them up. You got to soak them.
Okay.
You got to squeeze them.
All right. Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Uh-oh.
Ahsoka Tano is the name of Anakin's Padawan in the Clone Wars. I just couldn't.
Whoa.
I was thinking of
deep cut
Asuka from
it sounded
Ava?
Japanese to me or something.
Yeah, that's how I was hearing.
Did.
So I didn't hook it up till just now with Clone Wars.
Cool.
Fantastic.
So I was worried that secretly you were being baited, Drew.
Me too.
But this is just wholesome Star Wars fandom.
Great. If you want to send in your favorite Star Wars character, you can do so at shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. We usually read the emails on the pre-race shows, so look for that next week. You could also hit us up on the socials. We're on Mastodon, Twitter, and YouTube. Follow the links in the show notes for more. And that's us around the internet. Should we take it around the world of racing now, Danny?
This goes out to everyone in the hotel rooms around me. Let's race around the world.
The NASCAR Xfinity Series is at the Phoenix Raceway in Avondale, Arizona for the United Rentals 200. The Repco Supercar Series is at the Newcastle Street Circuit in Newcastle, East New South Wales.
Excuse me?
New South Wales.
Okay.
In Australia for the thrifty Newcastle 500. And we got NASCAR.
Oh my.
Oh, yeah. We're dueling in the desert.
I love it. Which desert? There's so many. Is it a food desert?
Probably.
It's just a Subway and a Quiznos and nothing else.
Yeah, it's the 2nd Street CVS office at Phoenix Raceway for the United Rentals Work United 500.
United. I didn't know you could rent an airplane, but there you go. Thrifty in New South Wales and United.
They got it all. And that's all the racing happening this weekend.
I have the book. It's here. Skip pad for 20 seconds.
Oh, wow. You brought your book.
I did. I remembered.
To the hotel room. Denny is now frantically reaching into his bag, retrieving the red-bound book.
If you didn't have the book, I would just encourage you to make something up.
Make some shit up. It's written in a prose that I don't think I'd be able to intimidate or intimidate.
This is the year Burt Reynolds had his first F1 test.
Exactly. No, this will be March 8th. So on March 8th, after years of Williams' domination, the F1 circus turned up at Melbourne for the opening round of the 1998 World Championship to find the team from Grove was no longer top dog. The McLaren Mercedes cars locked out a front row with Mika Hakkinen just ahead of David Coulthard. The race run on this day was to prove controversial when Hakkinen came into the pits on lap 36 thinking he had been called in by the team. They waved him on, but he had lost the lead to Coulthard, who moved over his teammate just before the end to give the Finnish driver the win. Moved over just before the end to give the Finnish driver the win. Yes, I remember that one. The team was heavily criticised, and there was talk of a pre-race agreement by the two drivers, but it was later relieved someone had hacked into Hakkinen's radio and told him to pit.
Whoa!
What?
Is that wild?
Sorry, what year was that?
This was sugar. What was it?
1998.
98. That makes sense.
That's some Mission Impossible era hacking,
isn't it?
I'm also 1998. I guess people hadn't really become totally jaded and cynical about team orders by then.
Team orders,
because I do feel just a few years after that, you got people just moving their guys around like chess pieces. And it's just yep, that's what it takes.
Imagine just getting like a ham radio and sitting in the crowd and going "Pit, hey Mika, pit, come in the pit."
It's totally your engineer.
It's your engineer. It's just come. Your tires are fucked. Pit, just pit. It's amazing. Could you imagine doing that and then watching him go in the pits? You'd be like, "Oh my god!"
Well,
this
and
is
also
almost as good as the guy who said, "What was it?" It told Eddie Irvine he'd snipe the tires of the other car. Do you remember? Oh, whatever.
Yeah, and also I do know compared to the electronic sophistication back then was so crude to what it is now. I do wonder how granular the radio frequencies they're using back in this era. Was it the sort of thing where you had yourself a pretty decent prosumer radio handset?
Yeah,
you could just sit there slowly dialing in the team.
Only the military had encryption at that point or whatever.
Yes. Right, so. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it couldn't have been that, it couldn't have been digital. It was 1998.
I never heard about and you would think maybe that came to light much later. I never heard anything about there being a suspicion that someone slipped him a bogus radio instruction.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Can you imagine if that happened today? It would be
fact check the book. Hey, maybe I just made that up. You never know.
If you'd like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes and the official Shift F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Final thoughts on the first race this season, Danny?
I'm just bummed that Jeddah's next. That's the thing that I'm ugh, we got to wait a week and then it's Jeddah, really? Yeah, I don't know. I've loads of questions, loads more questions. Super excited about the fight that's happening under first. Yeah, Red Bull look like this. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? You can never tell. A couple of races down the road, maybe they won't be that way. But I don't think we've seen Red Bull dominate a race quite like that even last year. So at least towards the end they had when people had kind of thrown in the towel. But looks like a great year for Red Bull fans and a great year for neutrals looking at the fight in the middle.
All right.
And at the top. Yeah.
Final thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, we have our biggest Formula 1.5 field in history. Formula 1.5 is thriving. Its crops are watered. And I guess the thing I'm really looking forward to is, look, Stroll and Alonso got into it a bit last year. We saw some like dubious but edgy driving from Stroll like last year, both with Alonso and with Vettel. I think one of the funniest subplots that could develop over the course of this year is like, once he's all healed up, maybe there's not as much daylight between them as there initially appeared, and Aston Martin's season just turns into a like dog shit Prost Senna situation,
Right.
as they fight tooth and nail. That's my wish for the season, because I think it'd be very entertaining.
All right. Well, I already did the outro because I haven't done this in a while. So have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.
Meow.